Stop being a coward, Pam. It's just a startup, not a moon launch. Derek Hines threw the sentence over the compressor whine at 6:12, with his hard hat still clean and his safety glasses still clear, like he had stepped out of an office and into a process he only respected when it hit production numbers. 7 minutes later, a pale green chlorine cloud would roll past Unit 4 and reach the employee parking lot. In that moment, though, all Pam Fletcher heard was the old hierarchy trick. Reduce a technical warning to a character flaw, then force compliance through shame. She stood at the C-shift board in the chlorine control room, left hand on the console rail, right hand hovering over the startup sequence panel she did not touch. The room smelled like warm electronics, coffee gone bitter on a burner, and the faint alkaline trace that always rode in from the scrubber side when doors opened. Outside the glass, sodium vapor lights were still on against a gray morning sky. The trend screens glowed in layered blues and reds. At the top of the primary HMI, the banner stayed fixed and bright. Scrubber Recirc Offline. Pam read that banner once, then read the supporting tags, because one red line by itself could be a bad transmitter. But 3 independent bad indicators meant process truth. P204. Recirculation pump status. Off. Scrubber loop differential pressure. Below permissive band. Caustic pH on the neutralization loop. Drifting low and still falling. She had spent 17 years learning that bad combinations killed people, not single bad numbers. Chlorine tolerated no improvisation. Derek stepped closer, invading the operator space as if proximity could change chemistry. You're stalling us. Open V17 and get transfer moving. Pam did not raise her voice. She had learned that calm language in a loud room unsettled aggressive managers more than shouting did. No. Interlock conditions aren't met. If we push dry chlorine without scrubber recirc, any leak path vents raw gas. He laughed once, short and hard. Software noise. Every week this system cries wolf and you hide behind it. She pivoted one monitor toward him and pointed with a gloved finger. Not dramatic, just precise. This is not one sensor. Pump status is hardwired. Delta P is out. pH is low. That means no neutralization capacity. We don't have a capture system if transfer header packing starts fuming. His face tightened. Not because he had a rebuttal, but because she had used mechanism instead of emotion. You operators always do this at startup. Delay, delay, delay. Lazy. The word landed harder than the yell. Pam had stayed through storms, freeze events, and 2 unit upsets that had sent everyone else sprinting while she held the board and walked the sequence back into stable range. She had trained 3 relief operators and corrected a dozen near misses before they became reportable releases. Lazy was not a description. It was a management tool. She felt the insult, then shelved it where she stored fatigue and anger, behind the larger obligation to keep people breathing. She tapped the console clock and logged a verbal warning in the electronic shift notes while she spoke. Because memory bends under pressure and historian logs do not. 613. Startup refused due to scrubber offline and chemistry out of spec. That is my call as board operator. Derek glanced at the logging window and his jaw set. The control room had 2 other people in it, a junior relief operator waiting to shadow, and an instrument technician who had come up to verify a transmitter earlier. Neither spoke. Both heard every word. Witnesses changed the stakes. Derek dropped his voice into that brittle register managers used when they wanted a direct order to sound administrative instead of reckless. Pam, do your job. We are already behind schedule. She met his stare, then looked through the glass toward the west fence and the parking lot beyond it. Windsocks on the pipe rack were canted in a steady line, pushing toward the gate road and the rows of pickups where night shift mechanics clocked out around this hour. Chlorine was heavier than air. It did not politely disperse upward like steam. It crawled, it pooled, it followed grade and low points and drains. She turned back to him. My job is to run this unit inside procedure. Wind is carrying toward the lot. If we get a release, it stays low. People walking out there are in that footprint. Derek snapped. Obsolete thinking. We run modern controls now, not 1980s superstition. The insult changed shape, but not intent. First coward, then lazy, now obsolete. Pam recognized the cadence. Attack competence, isolate the expert, force a fast decision before the room can process the hazard chain. She had watched that script play out in refineries, paper mills, and chemical plants across 3 states, always with different logos and the same ending. Somebody said it was fine. Somebody else coughed blood into a rag in a parking lot. Safety procedures were written in after-action language for a reason. By 6:14, the compressor load had steadied at idle, and the unit sat in that narrow operational pause where the safest decision was boring and the most dangerous decision looked efficient. Derek planted both palms on the console edge. I am not asking again. Open V17. Pam shook her head once. I can't. His expression turned triumphant, as if refusal proved his story about insubordination. Can't or won't. Won't violate chlorine transfer permissives. Those are not suggestions. He straightened and looked toward the door, then back at the junior operator. You hear this? She is refusing a startup. The junior operator swallowed and said nothing. Pam saw fear in him, but also confusion, because confusion was what bad leadership manufactured right before incidents. 2 authority channels, 1 technical and 1 hierarchical, and a young worker trapped between them. She softened her tone toward him without looking away from Derek. Listen to me carefully. Chlorine transfer without active scrubber recirc means no mitigation path if header packing leaks. Packing is worn on that leg. Maintenance noted it 2 weeks ago. If it starts fuming, your monitor will go high fast. You do not have enough time to learn this on the fly. Derek cut in. Do not coach my team against orders. Pam ignored the interruption and finished the sentence because unfinished safety warnings were a kind of surrender. If you smell bleach metal and your eyes burn, back out and mask up. Don't wait for permission. The instrument technician shifted his weight and finally spoke, careful and neutral. P204 seal work is still deferred, Derek. We haven't closed that work order. Derek wheeled on him. Not your lane. Then he turned to Pam again. You make 6 figures to push buttons. Push them. The line was meant to belittle, but Pam used it. She faced him squarely and spoke with the same cadence she used in incident interviews, as if she were already preserving the record for people not in the room yet. My name is Pam Fletcher. I am a chlorine unit operator. I make $112,000 a year because I catch failures before they become headlines. For a second, even the compressor noise seemed to recede behind the words. Derek stared at her, registering that she had reframed the fight from obedience to duty. from personality to consequence. That reframing was dangerous to him because it invited accountability. He reached for the nearest weapon left, paperwork and access control. "Step away from the board," he said. "If you won't run, you don't sit in that chair." Pam stepped back exactly one pace and clipped her radio to a different channel as she did, incident command instead of board operations. She did not touch a single startup control. She did not obstruct. She did not grant consent. "I am recording that this is management override against operator refusal." Derek pointed at the junior operator. "Take the seat." The younger man hesitated, eyes moving from Pam to the red banner to Derek's finger. He sat slowly, hands stiff above the keyboard. Pam felt the room split in two, one side of glass and steel and history where procedures lived, and one side of ego where schedules outranked safeguards. The split was invisible, but it was real, and everyone present could sense it. She leaned toward the junior operator, kept her voice low, and gave him the one instruction no supervisor could honestly call insubordination. "Read every permissive before you act, out loud. Make him hear what he is bypassing." Derek barked, "No commentary." Pam stood upright and folded her arms, forcing herself still. She watched the monitor reflections in the control room window, green status lights, red inhibited tags, white text entries stamped with time. A process incident always began in tiny clerical-looking places: a bypass checkbox, a deferred work order, a phrase like software noise. Catastrophe loved paperwork because paperwork made it look legitimate until physics arrived. From the corridor, a forklift beeped in reverse. Through the west glass, two mechanics in dark jackets crossed toward the parking rows, lunch bags in hand, shoulders rounded against the cold. They were exactly where the windsock said a ground-hugging plume would travel if containment failed. Pam keyed her radio and asked security for a current gate camera wind confirmation. She kept her wording clinical. Derek shot her a warning look, but he did not stop her. "Control to security, confirm wind at west fence line." A crackle, then reply. "Security copies, west-southwest, steady around 6 knots. Pam closed her eyes for one breath and opened them again. 6 knots was enough. Enough to carry, enough to harm. Enough to turn one manager's 7-minute shortcut into a county incident report. Derek tapped the back of the junior operator's chair. "Start sequence." The young man's cursor hovered over V-17 command. His hand trembled once, then steadied by force. Pam felt the insult shock settle into something colder and stronger than anger. She had been called coward, lazy, obsolete, in less than 3 minutes, and none of those words changed density, reactivity, or wind direction. Authority could threaten her badge. It could not negotiate with Chlorine. At 6:15, with the red Scrubber Recirc offline banner still burning across the top of the screen, Pam Fletcher stood beside the console she was no longer allowed to run and watched management prepare to test whether hierarchy could outrank chemistry. The junior operator swallowed, cleared his throat, and obeyed the one safe instruction left in the room. "Permissive check," he said, eyes locked on the startup panel. "Scrubber recirculation pump P204 required running. Status reads offline. Logic state." He paused, frowned, and leaned closer to the lower right corner of the screen where maintenance flags lived. "Logic state reads bypass active." Derek's jaw tightened. "Keep reading." Scrubber Delta P required 12 to 18 kilopascals. Actual is 2.1, out of range. Caustic pH required above 12.0. Actual is 10.7 and falling. His cursor moved to the transfer valve permissive line. V17 open command condition. Another pause. Condition forced true by supervisor override token. Pam did not move, but the muscles along her neck went hard. That final line meant someone had not just waived one condition during troubleshooting. They had bridged the entire gate. In a chlorine unit, a forced true permissive was a loaded chamber. She looked at the alarm banner, then at the trend strip beneath it. The pH line was not drifting anymore. It was stepping downward in short drops, the pattern of exhausted caustic being measured in a stagnant loop. Without recirculation, strong caustic settled, weak caustic pooled near the probe, and neutralization capacity became a guess. Guesswork and chlorine never shared a shift without invoices and ambulances later. She keyed her radio. Field operator control. I need eyes on scrubber skid and transfer header gland now. A response came through static and fan noise. Field copies. I'm at cell room north door, moving. Derek pointed at the junior operator's screen. Command V17. Pam stepped to the historian terminal and opened the event list, not to interfere, but to stamp every state change in a permanent clock. 6:15:11, supervisor token accepted. 6:15:13, permissive matrix edited. 6:15:16, V17 command armed. She entered a note with both hands steady. Management directed startup under active scrubber bypass. Operator objection logged. The words looked flat and bureaucratic. She knew they would later carry more weight than any shouted sentence in this room. The junior operator looked over his shoulder once, asking with his eyes for rescue he could not request out loud. Pam gave him a single nod that meant, do not rush, verify each indication, stay procedural, even if no one else is. He returned to the screen and clicked open 1-inch equivalent, a small crack open command meant to settle pressure and confirm line behavior before a rate increase. That was the one competent decision still available. At 6:15:24, the transfer header pressure trace twitched, then bounced in a narrow sawtooth between 64 and 79 pounds per square inch. It should have climbed in a smooth shoulder if downstream resistance and vent handling were stable. Oscillation at crack open meant gas was meeting intermittent back pressure and micro release points, a stutter in the system's lungs. Pam watched the frequency. 2 seconds per cycle, then 1.8, then 2.1. Not instrument noise. Process instability. Hold there, she said. Do not increase. Derek answered over her. Continue to 5%. The junior operator's hand hovered, then froze above the mouse. He said quietly, pressure isn't damping. Pam kept her voice level. Correct. That oscillation is telling you the line is breathing through a leak path. Hold position and isolate. Derek slapped the console edge with an open palm, a short metallic crack in the room. You are not in command. Pam ignored him and spoke to the junior operator by procedure number, not argument. Startup SOP 4.3.2, abnormal oscillation at transfer initiation. Maintain minimum position, request field verification, no rate increase until source identified. She tapped the printed binder on the shelf, tabbed and worn from real use. It is in black and white for this exact pattern. The radio snapped alive again. Control, field here. I'm on the scrubber platform. P204 is tagged deferred. Seal pot level is low. I've got crusting around the mechanical seal drain and wetness under the housing. Pam closed her eyes for half a second. Crusting meant caustic had dried where it should not have escaped. Wetness meant active leakage when running, which explained why maintenance deferred instead of testing under load. She asked the next question immediately. Any recirculation noise or vibration from the loop? Negative. Pump is dark. No flow in sight glass. Check transfer header packing near V17 branch. Stay upwind. Report visual only. Derek cut in toward the radio speaker. Do not create panic traffic. Pam turned the radio volume up one notch and waited. Through the control room glass, she could see dawn light gaining over pipe racks, painting everything in cold blue-gray. Two mechanics in the lot set their bags in truck beds and stood talking, unaware that decisions on a screen one building over were calculating their risk envelope by the second. The field operator came back, breathing harder from stairs. At header now. Packing gland looks damp. I'm seeing wispy white fume at the follower nuts. Intermittent. Not heavy yet. The junior operator whispered. White fume at the gland. Pam answered both men at once. That is chlorine hydrolyzing in ambient moisture at the leak point. Do not approach closer. Back out to clean air and stage SCBA near Unit 4 corridor. Derek shook his head with performative disbelief. Tiny gland sweat. Normal startup vapor. Pam faced him squarely. No, chlorine is dry in this header. A white plume at packing means release. The only question is rate. He gave a dismissive laugh that did not reach his eyes. You hear one field call and act like the plant is ending. She did not raise her voice. One field visual, one unstable pressure trace, one bypass scrubber, one depleted caustic loop. That is a converging hazard set, not a debate topic. At 6:16:02, the first fixed gas detector on the transfer rack chirped once and went amber on screen. GD4 a pre-alarm. 0.6 parts per million. The room went quiet except for the compressor whine and the periodic beep from the alarm cue. Amber at that location, this early at minimal valve position, confirmed that the packing leak was real and feeding downwind at grade. Chlorine monitors in that range were set conservatively because low-dose exposure invited complacency and delayed injury documentation. Pam had sat through enough post-incident medical reviews to respect low numbers. She pointed to the monitor. There, instrument confirmation. Derek leaned in and read it, then waved a hand. Subparts per million is background. Pam's reply came instantly. Not at this rack and not with dry transfer. Background chlorine here is 0 by design. The junior operator asked, still staring at the trend. Should I close V17? Yes, Pam said. Derek said at the same time, no, hold rate. The junior operator's breathing turned shallow. Pam could see it in his shoulders. Competing commands under hazard conditions paralyzed new operators faster than any alarm horn. She changed tactics and gave him a technical fact, yet no manager could edit. If detector trend doubles in under 1 minute, release rate is increasing faster than dispersion. We are already on that slope. Closing now limits mass. He looked at the trend strip. 0.6 to 0.8 in 20 seconds, then 0.9, then 1.1. The line was not jagged anymore. It was rising with intent. The second detector, GD4B, nearer the Westgate corridor, flickered from green to amber at 0.4 parts per million. That location mattered more than the absolute number. It marked plume migration away from the immediate equipment footprint and into traffic paths where people did not carry respirators because they were not assigned to chlorine operations. Pam keyed security again. Control to security, confirm Westgate foot traffic and start lot evacuation upwind Route B. Do not send people through Unit 4 corridor. Security answered faster than before. Copy evacuation Route B. We have night shift exits in progress. Derek stepped toward her, voice low and controlled in the most dangerous way. You are issuing site movement orders while relieved from console. Pam turned her radio screen toward him so he could hear the detector tones stacking in the background. I am issuing life safety communication under active gas indication. That authority does not come from you. The field operator called again, now from farther away, wind noise stronger. Control, fuming at gland is continuous now. I'm seeing light green tint close to grade by the curb channel. The junior operator whispered almost to himself, green at grade. Pam nodded. That is consistent. Chlorine density is about 2.5 times air. It hugs low points, drains, and curbs. Derek snapped, Stop teaching and run. She did not answer him. She watched the detector panel switch states. GD4A crossed into red, high at 2.0 parts per million. The horn changed cadence from intermittent chirp to steady pulse. 34 seconds later, GD4B hit 1.5 and climbing. The migration vector matched the wind conformation exactly, west-southwest, at 6 knots toward the gate road and parking rows. Chemistry was writing its own report in real time. By 6:16:58, with V17 still cracked, and no scrubber recirculation to capture upset venting, the process control room no longer held a theoretical disagreement. It held synchronized evidence. Pam opened the emergency response screen and read out loud, so everyone, including the recording historian microphone over the operator station, caught each word cleanly. Event classification, chlorine release, developing. Source, transfer header packing at V17 branch. Mitigation unavailable. Scrubber recirc offline. Caustic below spec. Protective action recommendation. Isolate source, shelter, or evacuate crosswind and upwind based on monitor map. The junior operator looked at Derek one last time, then clicked to close V17 by a quarter-turn equivalent. The pressure trace jolted, dipped, rose again with a smaller oscillation, proving the leak was tied directly to commanded flow. Pam seized that data point immediately. Correlation confirmed. Valve position change, altered release profile. Document that. She entered the timestamp herself at 6:17:09, fingers moving without hesitation. Her handwriting in the paper log was block printed and legible, a habit from years of testimony preparation after incidents at other sites. Illegible notes helped nobody when lawyers started asking what was known, when, and by whom. Outside, the dawn had fully broken and fluorescent fixtures clicked off one row at a time. The new daylight made the first low ribbon near the rack easier to see on camera feed. Pale, green-white, close to the concrete, sliding along the curb line like fog with intent. It was thin enough that an untrained eye could dismiss it. Pam had no such luxury. She keyed the radio to county notification pre-channel and held for one beat, listening to detector tones, wind call, and foot traffic reports converge into one unavoidable conclusion. The technical alarm phase was over. The hazard was identified and instrumented, visual and moving. Physics had entered the room, and it did not care who carried manager authority. Pam pressed the county notification key and said, County Hazmat Desk, this is Riverbend Chlor-Alkali, Unit 4 Control. We have an active chlorine release from transfer header packing. confirmed by fixed monitors and field visual. Scrubber recirculation is offline. Initiating site protective actions now. Her voice stayed flat, each clause clipped to what responders needed first. Source, status, mitigation gap, action. On the wall panel, GD4A climbed from 2.0 to 2.4 parts per million. GD4B crossed 1.9. The trend lines were no longer a warning. They were a moving map. Derek stepped in and jabbed at the mute key on the speaker, but Pam had already switched to headset. "End that call," he said. "You are escalating this out of proportion." She did not break transmission. Wind west-southwest, 6 knots. Plume migration toward Westgate and employee parking. Request county units stage upwind on access road north, gate 3. Then she lifted one ear cup and faced him. "External notification is mandatory once off-site impact is credible. We crossed that threshold 40 seconds ago." He leaned close enough for her to smell mint and coffee on his breath. "Threshold is my decision." "No," she said and pointed at the monitor stack. "Threshold is detector location, plus wind vector, plus source continuity. We have all 3. In her headset, County Dispatch answered. "Riverbend. Copy active release. Confirm estimated concentration at fence line." Pam scanned the extrapolation block and answered immediately. "Current fixed near source 2.4 and rising. Fence line estimate variable, likely subparts per million to low parts per million depending on turbulence. Heavier than air behavior observed at curb channel. Expect pooling in low spots." The dispatcher's tone sharpened. "Copy low-lying migration, county units rolling." Derek reached for the headset cord. Pam stepped back 1 pace, enough to keep the connection and avoid contact. "Do not interfere with emergency communication," she said. "That goes in the record too." The junior operator stared at the pressure trace, like it might grant permission from somewhere cleaner than this room. V17 sat partially closed from his last move. The oscillation had narrowed but not settled, a sawtooth still biting between 58 and 66 pounds per square inch. Leak rate reduced, not eliminated. The technical path was clear. Isolate source fully, stop feed, get scrubber recovery or alternate neutralization online, control plume with water curtains at perimeter. The managerial path was also clear and fatal. Deny, delay, and keep product moving. Pam keyed the field channel. "SCBA Team 1 confirmed staging." A new voice answered, masked and resonant through respirator mic. "Team 1 at Unit 4 corridor, 2 techs, 1 backup bottle cart. Proceed to upstream manual block MV17A and downstream MV17B. Approach from upwind side. Verify with portable chlorine meter every 10 feet. If reading spikes above entry limit, withdraw and report. You are isolating mechanical source, not heroics." Derek threw up a hand. "You are not incident commander." "Then assign one now," Pam said, "because the gas already has a plan." For a moment, nobody spoke. Horn cadence pulsed through the walls, steady and mechanical. Outside the glass, a forklift stopped mid-lane and reversed hard away from Unit 4. On camera 2, near the west fence, the low green ribbon thickened where the drainage dip crossed the access road, collecting in a shallow trough like tinted fog. A security cart turned around before entering it, tires throwing grit. County Dispatch came back. "Riverbend, hospitals notified, continue updates every 2 minutes." Pam acknowledged and logged the time with her free hand. 6:17:41, county notified, off-site potential declared. She entered detector values, wind, source, mitigation status. The keyboard clicks sounded tiny beside the horn, but she had sat through enough legal discovery to know tiny sounds outlived shouting. Derek pointed at the log entry and spoke through his teeth. "Delete that line." She met his eyes. "Event logs are immutable. You know that. Then amend it." "With what, exactly?" "Manager prefers silence while Chlorine moves toward the gate." His expression hardened into the corporate version of rage, colder than yelling. "You are out of line." Pam turned back to the room, not him. "Junior, listen carefully. Chlorine in moisture forms hydrochloric and hypochlorous acids at tissue surfaces. Eyes, throat, lungs. Early irritation is not safety, it is onset. If your detector shows a rise at a second location, that means plume front is traveling. You cannot negotiate with that by confidence." The junior operator nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Derek snapped. "Stop poisoning him with worst-case lectures." Pam's voice stayed level. "This is not worst case, this is current case." On the board, GD4B ticked to 2.3, then 2.7. Security radio erupted with overlapping calls. "West lot, people coughing near row C. Need guidance at Gate Road. We're redirecting foot traffic, but some already crossed." The words broke apart in static and urgency. Pam keyed in over them with command tone she had learned from drills that everyone hoped never became real. "All security units, move crosswind and upwind only. Do not drive through visible haze. Direct exposed personnel to decon showers at North Muster. Outer clothing bagged. Flush eyes with water continuously. Medical triage at Admin Bay B." Derek slammed his badge on the console. "I said stop giving orders." "You can write me up after breathing is handled," she said. The SCBA team checked in again, strained from mask breathing. At MV-17A, portable meter 5 parts per million and rising at knee height. Visibility low near curb. Attempting reach on valve wheel. "Confirm tether and line of sight with backup," Pam said. "If either loses visual contact, back out." "Confirmed." She glanced at the trend and made the call she had not wanted to make 5 minutes earlier. "Control to all units. Shelter-in-place signal upgrade to gas release protocol. Close exterior doors. Shut non-essential intake fans. Stay off floor drains and low trenches." Derek barked a short laugh of disbelief. "You're shutting half the site for a gland weep." Pam pointed to camera 2, where a maintenance cart sat half obscured in green haze at wheel height. "That is not a weep anymore." The county channel clicked. "Riverbend, do you require public alert support?" Pam answered. "Stand by for offsite confirmation. Plume currently at or near west parking boundary." Derek stepped between her and the console, using his body to block the screen like that could block the data. "You are done, Pam. Step back and keep quiet." She shifted left and kept working around him. "No." One word, no theatrics. Controlled defiance looked almost boring from the outside. Inside, her pulse hammered so hard she felt it in her fingertips. She had trained herself for this exact split-second decision years ago in tabletop drills where managers played the skeptic and operators played the witness. The rule never changed. When process hazard and chain of command collide, protect life first and document every interference. She keyed county again. "Off-site potential now probable. Recommend precautionary advisory for adjacent roadway and lot perimeter." Derek's face flushed. "I'm giving you a direct order to terminate external comms." Pam replied without looking at him. Direct order refused. Mechanism, ongoing uncontrolled toxic gas migration beyond unit boundary. Confirmed by fixed and portable detection. Procedure requires notification. Law requires notification. He grabbed the shoulder of the junior operator's chair and said, loud enough for the room and the overhead mic, "Reopen V17 to prior position and maintain transfer." "We are not choking the line for phantom numbers." The junior operator went pale. "Sir, closing reduced oscillation. Reopening may increase leak rate." "Do it," Pam cut in instantly. "Do not. Any rate increase raises mass release. Mass release times wind equals footprint. That footprint already includes occupied areas." Derek pointed at the door. "Security will walk you out if you keep countermanding." "Call them," Pam said. "I'll brief them on plume direction on the way." At 6:18:24, the first call from parking lot medical came through, voice ragged but coherent. "Control, this is Medic at West Lot. We have multiple workers with severe eye irritation and coughing. Need guidance, maybe 10 cases here." 10 at first report. Pam's throat tightened, then steadied. Numbers during first minute were always low because people underreported while trying to keep moving. "Move them upwind to North Muster immediately. Keep them sitting upright. Continuous eye flush. Remove contaminated outerwear if feasible. Do not let anyone re-enter lot for vehicles." Derek shook his head as if the medic had insulted him personally. "Drama." Pam turned to him then, fully, and the anger in her stayed precise. "You called this software noise at 6:12. You called detector alarms background at 6:16. We now have injured personnel at 6:18. Words do not dilute chlorine." The room door opened and 2 security officers arrived, both wearing half-mask respirators clipped, but not yet donned. Uncertainty written across their faces because they had been summoned for a personnel issue into an active hazard. Derek pointed at Pam. "Relieve her from duties. Badge suspension pending investigation." Pam spoke first, fast and clear. "Before you move anyone, note this. Active chlorine plume is tracking west-southwest at grade. If you escort me, route north corridor only. Also note that management directed startup with scrubber bypass active. That statement is being recorded." The older officer hesitated, then nodded once to show he heard her. Derek thrust a paper form at the desk, signature line already highlighted. "Administrative removal, sign it." Pam glanced at it. "Temporary suspension for insubordination." She set it down unsigned. "I will sign acknowledgement after immediate response actions are staffed. You sign now or your refusal is misconduct. My refusal already has a mechanism and timestamp." He turned to the younger security officer. "Take her badge." Pam unclipped it herself and held it up. Her name and photo flashed under fluorescent light, edges worn from years on lanyards and lockers and PPE straps. She placed it on the console right beside the event log printout so the camera saw both in one frame. "Badge surrendered under protest during active release," she said. "Record that line exactly." The junior operator's cursor still hovered over V17. He looked trapped between disaster math and payroll math. Derek saw it and pressed harder. "You're on this seat now. Follow my order." Pam gave the junior one final operational sentence, stripped to essentials. "If you choose one thing, choose source isolation. You can recover production. You cannot recover lungs the same way." Derek pointed to the door. "Out." She picked up her radio, now technically not hers, and clipped it to her belt anyway. "I am moving to muster corridor. I remain available for technical guidance." "You are relieved." "From the chair," she said, "not from reality." Security escorted her into the hall. Horns pulsed louder outside the insulated control room walls, and the faint, bleach metal bite in the air told her the plume had found another path through door seals and ductwork. Behind her, through narrowing glass, she saw Derek bend over the junior operator and tap the screen where V-17 Command sat waiting. The power pressure phase was complete. Rank had spoken, paperwork was in motion, and the person with the mechanism had been pushed out of the seat. Physics was still running the plant. The hallway swallowed the control room noise and replaced it with alarm pulse, boot steps, and the thin hiss of ventilation dampers trying to keep up with conditions they were never designed to face. Pam walked between the two security officers, eyes already scanning the wall-mounted gas map repeaters outside operations. GD4A was red and climbing. GD4B had crossed high. A third point, GD Gate 1, still showed green, but the refresh icon spun with a lag that made her jaw tighten. In release events, stale data was its own hazard. Her radio cracked with overlapping voices before she reached the muster corridor door. Control, SCBA Team 1, MV-17A is stiff. Taken torque. Medic to control, now 14 symptomatic at West Lot. Security West Gate requesting route confirmation. Then Derek's voice cut across all of it, clean and forceful on the priority channel. Board to field, maintain transfer at previous set point. Do not isolate until I confirm root cause. Pam stopped in the corridor threshold and looked at the older security officer. You heard that? He nodded once, uneasy. I heard. She keyed her radio without asking permission. All units, this is Pam Fletcher from Muster Corridor. Safety advisory, source not isolated, release ongoing. Any instruction to increase transfer rate increases mass release. Crosswind or upwind movement only. Derek answered instantly, sharp with anger. You are relieved. Stay off operations channels. Pam spoke over him with the cadence of drill command. Junior operator report current V-17 position. Silence stretched for 2 beats. Then the younger man answered in a strained voice. V-17 reopened to 3% equivalent under supervisor direction. Header pressure oscillation widened. GD4A now 3.1 parts per million. Pam closed her eyes for one breath. 3% sounded small to office ears. In chlorine transfer with a compromised packing path, 3% was a pump handle on a leak. Copy. Correlation remains direct. Recommend immediate closure and manual block isolation. Derek came back, louder. Disregard, hold steady, this is a transient. The older security officer stepped aside and let Pam move to the corridor response panel. Her badge was gone, but emergency screens in this hallway were open access by design, because lives outranked HR workflow. She pulled up the wind feed and felt dread settle in as hard certainty. West-southwest, 6 knots gusting 7. Parking lot and gate road still inside the drift line. At 6:18:47, GD-gate-1 flipped from green to amber at 0.5 parts per million. Pam tapped the screen once so both officers could see. That is off-unit migration. It has crossed the boundary sensors. The younger security officer finally put on his half-mask. His hands shook while he tightened the straps. Do we clear admin too? Not yet, Pam said. Seal exterior doors first. Keep intake dampers at minimum. Move anyone outside north, not west. The medic channel returned, words clipped by exertion. Need more rinse stations at North Muster. Some workers can't keep eyes open. Use emergency eye wash carts from maintenance bay, Pam said. Continuous flush, 15 minutes minimum. track names and exposure location for follow-up. Derek pushed into the corridor with 2 shift supervisors behind him, face flushed, tie tucked into his coveralls like he had remembered PPE optics too late. "You're done giving orders," he said to Pam. "You are creating panic." She pointed to GD-Gate-1 and then to the live camera tile beneath it. The camera showed a low haze crawling along curb lines near parked trucks, pale in the morning light, almost decorative until a worker walked into it and doubled over against a tailgate. "That is not panic. That is a plume front." One supervisor looked at the screen and swore under his breath, then caught himself. "Derek, gate monitor just went high at 1.2. Derek did not look away from Pam. "Instrumentation drift." Pam answered before anyone else could. 3 independent detectors, 1 field visual, 1 medic report cluster, 1 wind-consistent migration path. That is confirmation by redundancy. The radio snapped again. SCBA Team 1 sounded breathless through masks. "Reached MV-17A. Valve wheel moved half-turn toward close. Meter spiked to 8 parts per million near knee height at curbside. Visibility worsening low level." Pam keyed back. "Good work. Do not overextend. Confirm downstream block MV-17B status." Team 2 at MV-17B, beginning closure now. Derek stabbed a finger toward her. "Countermand, hold blocks open until we verify process stability." Team 2 hesitated on channel, then asked the only safe question. "Confirming command authority?" Pam answered with procedure, not ego. "Emergency Response Matrix Section 2.1. Toxic release with off-site potential defaults to Life Safety Command. Isolate source." The older supervisor turned to Derek. "She's right on Matrix priority." Derek's reply came flat and dangerous. "I am operations manager. My command stands." No one spoke for 3 seconds. The horns pulsed. A forklift alarm in the distance chirped and stopped. Somewhere a metal door slammed, then another. Pam felt the corridor floor vibrate faintly with compressor rhythm and understood exactly what was about to happen if this argument consumed 1 more minute. She switched to County Channel again. "County Hazmat Riverbend update. Boundary detector positive. Off-site impact now confirmed at gate perimeter. Request immediate public traffic diversion at west access." "Copy confirmed," dispatch replied. "Sheriff units rerouting now. ETA hazmat 6 minutes. Derek stepped in front of her, trying to block the microphone. "You do not have authority to declare off-site impact." Pam leaned around him and finished the transmission. Additional note: source isolation is being contested by site management, despite active rise. Dispatch paused half a beat, then answered. Message received and logged. That line landed in the hallway like a dropped wrench. One supervisor looked at Derek as if seeing him for the first time. At 6:19:03, the process horns switched cadence from local release alert to full shelter in place. The new tone was lower, longer, impossible to misread. On the camera wall, the haze at the west lot thickened from translucent ribbon to a broad sheet that erased ankle lines and then wheel rims. Windsock feed from the pipe rack twitched and settled 5 degrees farther south. Pam felt it in her stomach before she said it out loud. "Wind shift. Lot is now centerline." The medic channel turned chaotic. "We've got people down behind row C, multiple, repeat, multiple. Need transport support now." Dread ended there. Impact arrived in pieces measured by seconds. 9 seconds after the wind shift, GD-LOT-2, the detector nearest employee parking, jumped from no signal to 1.8 parts per million, then 2.6 on its next update. Camera 3 showed 3 mechanics trying to move crosswind between pickups, shirts over their mouths, one guiding another by the elbow. The cloud overtook them at knee level first, then waist height in the shallow dip between parking rows. 2 made it to clearer air. 1 dropped to a crouch beside a rear tire, coughing hard and unable to stand. Pam was already moving toward the North Muster Command Desk. Security North Team, deploy carts and extra water. Do not send unmasked responders into West Lot. SCBA only for retrieval. The younger security officer followed her, voice tight. We only have 4 SCBAs staged? Then triage by proximity and meter reading, Pam said. Nearest viable first. Keep retrieval path upwind edge by fence line if possible. Derek kept pace behind her. No one is entering that lot until we verify concentrations. Liability exposure is enormous. Pam turned on him mid-stride. People are already exposed. Liability is not the first variable. She reached the muster desk, grabbed the laminated site map, and marked plumes spread with a grease pencil as live detector values updated. The pattern was textbook and still terrifying. Chlorine hugging grade, deepening in drainage swales, flattening into opaque pockets where airflow stalled between vehicles. She keyed SCBA Team 2. Report MV-17B. MV-17B closed, came the reply. Reading dropped slightly at our position. Report MV-17A. A pause, heavy breathing, then MV-17A not fully seated, wheel binding. We can force with cheater bar, but exposure rises at valve face. Pam made the call without hesitation. Use bar with 2-person control, 30-second work cycles, then retreat and meter check. I want that upstream block seated. Derek reached for the radio in her hand. She pulled it back, and the older security officer stepped between them. Not aggressive, just firm. Sir, let her work. At 6:19:41, the first county siren became audible beyond the fence, thin at first, then rising. Inside the plant, workers moved in controlled disorder. Some masked, some wrapped in wet towels, all following shouted directions toward North Muster. A contractor stumbled through the doorway, eyes red, hands shaking. Pam steered him to the rinse line, tilted his face toward flowing water, and told him to keep blinking. He nodded and coughed until he could breathe in full again. The radio gave her no pause. Gate security to command. 2 commuters on Access Road, reporting throat burn from vehicles with windows down. Log them for clinic follow-up and direct to Decon Point C, Pam said. Advise sheriff to keep traffic sealed until county air confirms clear. This was the systemic edge she had warned about in every training cycle. Exposures that looked minor at first and multiplied quietly across contractors, drivers, and bystanders long after a manager declared the event contained. No blast, no fireball, just a toxic debt carried on wind. SCBA Team 1 came back with urgency. MV-17A seated. Repeat. Upstream block seated. Meter at source dropping from 9 to 4 and falling. Pam exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours, though the console clock said less than 5 minutes had passed since she left the control room. Excellent. Hold position upwind and verify no rebound. Team 2 maintain downstream closure. On the detector panel, GD4A began to descend in small steps, 3.9 to 3.4. GD4B slid from 3.1 to 2.7. The lot monitor lagged behind, still high, Because clouds move slower than commands and settle where geometry traps them. She kept issuing orders. Activate deluge curtain at west fence nozzles if water supply pressure is stable. We're not scrubbing chemistry there. We're knocking down plume height and slowing spread. A utilities tech answered, deluge line charging now. 30 seconds later, the camera feed showed broad fans of water arcing across the fence corridor, turning the green-white sheet into ragged bands that clung lower and fragmented between parked vehicles. Not solved, but improved. A path for retrieval opened along the north edge. County Hazmat arrived at Gate 3 at 6:20:26 and patched into Plant Command. Riverbend Command, County on scene. We need incident lead. Pam opened her mouth, then glanced at Derek. He was already speaking, voice composed for outsiders. Derek Hines, operations manager. We had an unexpected weather-related dispersion during startup. Pam cut across with one sentence, exact and calm. Incident lead advisory. Release initiated during management-directed transfer with scrubber recirculation offline and permissive bypass active. Source now isolated by SCBA teams at MV-17A and MV-17B. The county officer paused, then said, Copy advisory. Preserve all logs and bypass records. We will require immediate handoff. Derek stared at her, stunned that the narrative had slipped from his grip in real time. Behind him, one supervisor looked down at the floor, and the other quietly began pulling printed historian strips from the nearby station for evidence retention. At 6:21, the worst of the visible cloud at the lot started to thin under combined isolation and water curtain knockdown. Workers still coughed in the rinse line. Medics still moved briskly between chairs and stretchers. No one celebrated. Impact in chlorine incidents rarely looked cinematic up close. It looked like eyes clamped shut, tight chests, trembling hands, and 100 small decisions that determined whether people went home or went to hospital. Pam stood at the muster desk with wet sleeves, a borrowed radio and no badge, watching detector numbers descend 1/10 at a time. The unsafe operation had run exactly as she predicted. The failure had unfolded on timestamp, and the parking lot had become part of the process boundary because management pretended boundaries were optional. Physics had answered the argument in less than 9 minutes. Pam stood at the muster desk with the grease pencil still in her hand and watched GD-LOT-2 finally drop below 2 parts per million. The number did not feel like relief. It felt like a slower kind of danger, the kind that still hurt people, while managers started choosing language. County Hazmat moved in beside her with clipboards, portable meters, and a command tablet already open to an incident form. One officer glanced at the detector wall, then at the rows of workers flushing their eyes under portable stations. Who has operational knowledge and current readings? He asked. Pam raised her hand. Pam Fletcher, Senior Board Operator, Chlorine Unit. Source isolated at both manual blocks. Scrubber recirculation was offline at release start. Current near-source readings trending down. Lot still elevated in low spots. The officer nodded once and began writing. Injured count. Confirmed symptomatic on-site is 21 and climbing. 6 already moved for overnight observation. No confirmed fatalities. Derek stepped closer, voice clipped and polished. We are still verifying causation. Wind behavior was atypical. County did not even look up. Causation goes in the investigation section. Right now I need numbers and controls. Pam keyed medical triage. North Muster update count. A nurse answered over background coughing and running water. 26 symptomatic now, eye irritation, chest tightness, persistent cough. 2 with oxygen support, stable. Pam relayed it immediately. The officer added the number and circled it. You have off-site reports? 2 commuters at Access Road reported throat burn from vehicles with windows down, Pam said. Security logged names and redirected to Decon Point C. Good. Preserve that log. That phrase repeated all morning. Preserve that log, preserve that video, preserve that historian stream. Every system that usually existed to run production suddenly became evidence. At 6:28, the county incident lead ordered unified command and asked for site authority signatures. Derek reached for the form first. The county lead held it out of reach for 1 extra second and said, "Before signatures, I need the bypass record for your scrubber permissive." Silence touched the table for a beat. Pam answered while Derek searched for a safer sentence. Bypass token active at 6:15. Force true permissive on V17 transfer condition, while P204 was offline and caustic pH below spec. The lead wrote that down exactly as spoken. Print it and seal chain of custody. One of the shift supervisors who had gone quiet earlier arrived with a stack of historian strips and placed them in a clear evidence bag. His hands were still trembling, but his labels were clean. Date, time, unit, source terminal, initials. Pam watched him write and felt a hard, practical gratitude. In industrial events, honesty often showed up first in handwriting. At 6:34, deluge curtains continued pinning the cloud, low along the west fence, while county meters mapped pockets near drain inlets and curb depressions. The highest readings were no longer at the source. They were where terrain had trapped gas after the release rate fell. That mattered for medical and for law because it explained why people away from Unit 4 still got hit. Chlorine followed grade, not org charts. Pam walked the triage line with a medic and counted out loud. Not for drama, for accuracy. Chair 1, responsive. Chair 2, oxygen in place. Chair 3, repeat eye flush. Chair 4, transport tag yellow. A mechanic she recognized from night shift looked up with red-rimmed eyes and managed, "You warned them, didn't you?" Pam kept moving and answered honestly, "Yes." By 6:47, County declared hot zone boundaries and barred all non-essential movement west of Unit 4. Security taped lanes, rerouted internal traffic, and posted spotters with portable meters at every corridor intersection. The plant had shifted from production geometry to emergency geometry, airflow, elevation, choke points, and clean approach lines. On the command board, Derek's startup schedule was still clipped to a corner under a magnet. Someone removed it without comment. At 7:02, corporate risk management joined by conference line. Speakerphone quality flattened everyone into metallic voices, but the priorities came through clearly. Incident classification, business interruption estimate, notification sequence, claim posture. Corporate counsel asked the first legal question in a tone that sounded almost bored. Was any critical safeguard intentionally bypassed? Derek answered first. There were temporary logic accommodations pending maintenance closure. Pam leaned toward the phone. Yes. Scrubber permissive was forced true while recirculation pump remained out of service, and caustic concentration was below startup threshold. The line went quiet for 2 seconds. Then counsel said, "Understood. Do not alter any control logic states. Full legal hold effective immediately on logs, emails, maintenance notes, and radio recordings. A second corporate voice cut in, this one from Insurance Liaison. If intentional bypass is confirmed, expect reservation of rights language and potential denial on major claim segments tied to safeguard defeat. No one at the table reacted outwardly, but the meaning landed. Repairs were expensive. Lost production was worse. An insurer denial could turn a bad week into a balance sheet wound that lasted years. At 7:19, medical updated again. 29 acute exposures, 6 admissions for overnight observation, no critical airway compromise. County wrote the numbers on the whiteboard in thick black marker. 29 looked different when written large. It looked like payroll. It looked like families waiting for texts. It looked like a manager's shortcut converted into a ledger line that would never fully close. Pam requested permission to begin controlled stabilization tasks at the unit and received a narrow approval. No restart actions, only safing actions under county oversight. She took 2 operators and 1 instrument tech in full respiratory protection to the control room perimeter. Through the glass, she saw V-17 command window still open on the screen, where the junior operator had left it. The red Scrubber Recirc offline banner remained across the top, unchanged, indifferent, exact. Capture screenshots of every active alarm and inhibit, she said, then export event chronology minute by minute. The instrument tech nodded. Already mirrored to secure server. I also pulled Logic Solver audit trail. Good. Hash the files and print check some. He gave her a brief look of respect. On it. By 8:05, operations issued a formal shutdown notice for the chlorine unit and linked upstream cells. The reason code read, Toxic Release Response/Investigation Hold. Estimated downtime at that moment was listed as unknown. Pam crossed that out and wrote a realistic preliminary range. Minimum 3 weeks for decontamination, inspection, seal replacement, logic validation, regulator clearance, and staged recommissioning. 1 week fantasies had caused this incident. She refused to start another one. Derek objected in front of county and corporate. 3 weeks is inflated. Pam replied with process sequence, not tone. You need complete scrubber mechanical repair, fresh caustic charge verification, detector bump tests, logic permissive restoration, management of change review, operator retraining, and third-party readiness audit. That is not a weekend. County backed her immediately. Site restart requires our concurrence and state concurrence. Her sequence stands. At 8:42, State Environmental Agency joined the call and requested initial release mass estimate. Pam provided a bounded range using valve position, pressure behavior, and detector progression. She explained the uncertainty factors plainly: oscillatory flow, leak path geometry, and changing wind angle. The agency accepted the range and requested fence line sampling plus deposition swabs from nearby surfaces. A field team started collecting samples from parked vehicles, gate rails, and playground equipment at a daycare 2 blocks downwind. No alarms, no headlines yet. Just swabs, labels, custody seals, and the beginning of delayed consequences that arrived after the visible cloud was gone. The financial board started filling by late morning. Maintenance and procurement posted rough figures in dry marker that kept getting revised upward. Emergency contractor mobilization, neutralization chemicals, contaminated runoff handling, instrument replacement, lost tonnage of chlorine, and downstream product commitments. By 10:10, direct response and repair estimate crossed $6 million and still excluded civil claims. By 11:30, Operations planning projected at least 40 days of constrained output across linked units if the shutdown held through full investigation. Corporate finance asked for a cleaner number. Pam gave them the only honest answer. Current estimate is a moving target, but you are past 8 million direct exposure before business interruption. Add lost production and you will cross 20 million if downtime reaches 6 weeks. The insurance liaison came back onto speaker at 11:42 with preliminary position. We are issuing reservation of rights. Any damages attributable to deliberate safeguard bypass may be excluded pending investigation findings. Derek finally lost the polished tone. So you're abandoning us during response? The liaison answered with legal calm. We are reserving rights under policy terms. Preserve all evidence. At noon, County downgraded immediate life hazard in most zones, but kept the west lot and drainage low points restricted until repeated clear readings were logged. Workers were released in controlled waves through north exit only. Security handed out claim forms for personal vehicle contamination. The line was long and quiet. Men and women who normally argued over overtime stood shoulder to shoulder filling boxes that asked where they were standing when they started coughing. Pam found the junior operator near the supply cabinet, still wearing his respirator around his neck, eyes hollow with adrenaline crash. You did one thing right when it counted, she told him. You closed when the data told you to close. He stared at the floor. I reopened when he ordered it. You were under coercion in an active event. Tell the timeline exactly as it happened. No edits, no heroics, no self-protection language, just sequence. He nodded, swallowed, and said, I can do that. At 12:37, County began formal witness statements. Pam gave hers standing at a folding table with a bottle of water she never opened. She gave times to the minute, tag names, alarm states, commands issued, refusals logged, and actions taken after removal from console. She did not speculate and did not soften verbs. Directed, refused, reopened, isolated, notified. Each word had a place in the chain. When Derek's interview started, he leaned on weather variance and instrument uncertainty. The county investigator listened without expression, and then held up printed historian records showing bypass activation, forced permissive status, and command timing aligned with detector rise. The investigator asked one question in a neutral voice. Do you dispute these timestamps? Derek looked at the sheet for a long moment. No. By mid-afternoon, the first legal outcomes were not court orders but operational facts. Derek was removed from incident authority and placed on administrative leave pending gross negligence review. Corporate issued a site-wide notice requiring executive approval for any temporary bypass on toxic service systems. Procurement froze non-essential spending to preserve cash for response liabilities. Human Resources opened exposure support cases for all affected personnel, including contractors and commuters documented at the Gate Road. The plant had not returned to normal. It had shifted into accountability mode. At 15:05, County Hazmat handed Pam a copy of the preliminary incident summary for site records. She read the lead sentence. Chlorine release, associated with startup under disabled mitigation safeguard, off-site impact confirmed, injuries documented, no fatalities. It was plain, restrained, and devastating in its own way. As shift change approached, detector boards finally held steady in safe bands across all points, including the lot and gate corridor. The visible haze was gone. The consequences were not. Medical follow-ups were scheduled for 72 hours because chlorine exposures often worsened after apparent recovery. Environmental sampling chains were still open. Claims hotlines were active. Investigators were imaging hard drives. Lawyers were issuing hold notices. Finance was recalculating quarter guidance in another building, where no one smelled chlorine, but everyone would feel it. Pam stood once more at the muster desk, now cluttered with used gloves, empty saline bottles, and signed forms, and wrote the day's final operational line in block letters. Unit 4 remains shut down. Pending mechanical repair, logic restoration, regulatory clearance, and verified training completion. Then she added one more sentence for the record. Not rhetorical, just true. They had tried to save one startup window by bypassing a scrubber, and by sunset, the cost sat in ambulances, evidence bags, denied coverage language, and a silent chlorine unit that would not run again until procedure, chemistry, and accountability were back in the same room. At 1722, with dusk flattening the pipe racks into dark geometry, Pam sat in the temporary command trailer, while County Investigator Lena Ortiz laid every collected item across a metal table and read the chain of custody numbers out loud. Evidence Bag 4C, historian strips from Unit 4. Evidence Bag 4D, printed bypass audit trail from Logic Solver. Digital Packet 4E, alarm screenshots with checksum hash. Ortiz slid each form forward and Pam signed beside timestamps she had already memorized. Process truth had moved from monitors to paper, and paper now had legal weight. Derek arrived 3 minutes later with a corporate representative and a hard expression that looked more practiced than steady. Ortiz did not ask anyone to sit. She held up Pam's surrendered badge in a clear sleeve. Recovered from control console at 6:18, camera verified. Administrative removal during active release, logged. Then she held up the highlighted suspension form Derek had pushed at Pam in the corridor. Unsigned, photographed, and attached to timeline. Derek opened his mouth. Ortiz raised one hand. You will have your interview slot. Right now we are closing item accountability. The older security officer, Malik Rios, stepped in next, half mask dangling from one hand. In the corridor he had worn uncertainty. In the trailer he wore resolve. Ortiz asked, "Did you hear an order to stop external emergency communication?" Malik answered without looking at Derek. "Yes." Repeated. Ortiz wrote it, then asked, "Did you hear Ms. Fletcher provide plume direction and safe escort route?" Malik nodded. "Yes. North corridor only. That guidance kept us out of the low spots." The younger officer gave the same statement word for word. The loaded hesitation both officers had carried in the hallway ended there. At 1749, Ortiz turned to the shift supervisor, who had gone quiet when County first asked for bypass records. He placed both palms on the table and finally finished the sentence he had swallowed hours earlier. "I knew the bypass was still active when startup began," he said. "I saw it in the morning log and did not challenge it. That is on me." Ortiz asked, "Why not?" He stared at the evidence bags. Because Derek had already said anyone slowing startup would be replaced. Pam watched him speak and felt no triumph, only the hard clarity that fear and silence were also process variables. By 1803, the last loose thread from the control room was tied off. The instrument technician submitted the mirrored server export, handed over the printed checksum sheet, and confirmed that no logic edits occurred after legal hold. The grease pencil plume map Pam had marked at muster was photographed, scanned, and logged as Reference Exhibit 7A, then placed in archival storage. The county lead read back every external contact outcome in a single sequence. County notification received at 6:17:41. Hospitals alerted. Sheriff traffic diversion executed. State environmental sampling opened. Commuter exposure reports assigned case numbers and clinic follow-up orders issued for all named workers and contractors. Nothing remained as rumor. 3 days passed before Pam heard the county clinic coordinator on speakerphone at 8:11 in the site conference room. The room smelled like copier, toner, and disinfectant, and every chair was filled with operations, medical, legal, and county staff. Coordinator Nisha Vale read from a spreadsheet. Second wave presentations. 11 additional individuals with delayed respiratory symptoms, primarily low-dose exposure from lot perimeter and access road transit. Total documented medical cases now 40, and no one interrupted. Vale continued, no fatalities. 2 patients required short inpatient respiratory support beyond initial overnight group. All currently stable. State environmental scientist Joel Mercer followed with swab results, laying photos of sample points across the table. Pickup door handles, Westgate rail, playground monkey bars, 2 blocks downwind, all tagged and timed. Elevated chloride deposition consistent with chlorine hydrolysis products found on west lot vehicles and selected downwind metal surfaces. Findings support low-level off-site contact. Derek's corporate representative asked, "Are we talking permanent contamination?" Mercer shook his head. "No, cleanable with proper protocol, but it confirms plume travel beyond fence. That is a regulatory fact." The strange detail Pam had flagged at dawn, chlorine following curbs and drains, now sat in lab language and signed reports. At 8:47, Communications Director Aaliyah Penn projected social clips on the screen. Phone footage of pale haze moving between parked trucks, workers shouting directions, a deputy cruiser blocking the access road. Penn kept her voice measured. Public narrative formed before our first press line. Perception is now tied to safeguard bypass, not weather anomaly. She clicked to the next slide. Customer emails requesting assurance letters, 2 contract buyers pausing shipments, and a local school board asking for independent air briefings before resuming full outdoor activities. The delayed consequence Derek had dismissed as panic was now reputational mathematics, slow and expensive. At 9:05, Insurance Counsel joined by video and delivered the decision everyone expected and still hoped to avoid. Reservation of rights is converted to partial denial for loss segments directly attributable to intentional safeguard bypass. She cited policy clauses, then looked straight into the camera. Covered. Portions of emergency response and defined remediation. Not covered. Bypass linked, business interruption, and punitive components. Finance wrote numbers in silence. Small shortcut. Massive invoice. Dark irony did not need commentary. On the second Friday after the release, at 13:30, the disciplinary panel convened in Training Room B, the same room where startup permissives were taught every quarter with laminated flow diagrams and old incident photos nobody studied closely enough. Pam sat at one end with union representation. Derek sat across with counsel. Human Resources Director Marta Keene opened the binder and said, "This hearing addresses gross negligence findings under site policy and management standards." Her tone was controlled, but the binder tabs were color-coded like a warning panel. Bypass, orders, notifications, injury data, claims. Keene played the radio audio first. Derek's own voice filled the room. Maintain transfer, do not isolate, terminate external comms, weather-related dispersion. Then Pam's voice. Source isolation, off-site potential, county notification required. Then medic calls from the lot. Keene clicked off playback and slid printed transcripts forward. Do you dispute authenticity? Derek's counsel answered, no dispute on authenticity, dispute on interpretation. Keene replied, interpretation is constrained by timestamps and instrument data. The junior operator testified next. He looked younger than he had at the board that morning, but his statement was clean. I read permissives out loud. Scrubber recirc offline, pH low, forced true condition active. I closed V17 once. Under direct instruction, I reopened. Detector values increased. Keene asked, any coercive language? He hesitated one beat, then answered, yes, job threat language. The loaded glance he had given Pam in the control room was resolved in 12 plain words. Malik testified after him, then the instrument technician, then the shift supervisor who had admitted silence. Each account aligned on the same chain: deferred seal repair, active bypass, refusal overridden, release migration, delayed isolation. No dramatic contradiction arrived to rescue Derek's version. Physics did not need drama, it needed sequence. At 15:02, Keene read the decision. Derek Hines is terminated for gross negligence, willful safeguard bypass, and interference with emergency communication. Bonus eligibility is revoked. Severance is denied under misconduct clause. Clawback action is initiated for current fiscal incentive payouts. Derek stood so fast his chair scraped hard across tile. You're making me the scapegoat for a systems failure. Keene did not blink. Systems do fail. Safeguards exist for that reason. You disabled one and overrode the operator who cited the mechanism. That finding is not ambiguous. 5 days later, at 10:18, Pam sat in county court on a wooden bench while the clerk called case numbers in a room that smelled of varnish and old paper. Derek, in a plain suit this time, entered a plea to a reduced negligent release charge after subpoenaed logs contradicted his sworn weather narrative. The judge asked, do you understand the factual basis for this plea includes intentional bypass and delayed isolation? Derek answered, quieter than anyone at the plant had ever heard him. Yes. The sentence included probation, mandatory safety management training, and community service tied to emergency preparedness programs. It was not cinematic. It was formal accountability, line by line. That afternoon, back at Riverbend, Pam reported to a smaller room with a whiteboard, 3 binders, and a new placard on the door. Site Process Safety Review Board. Plant manager Elena Cruz handed Pam a replacement badge and a back pay letter across the table. Reinstated effective immediately, Cruz said. Compensation corrected to include suspension period. You will chair startup permissive reform for toxic service units. Pam clipped the badge to her shirt and looked at the agenda already waiting. Bypass approval hierarchy, emergency channel authority, coercion reporting protections, and mandatory cross-training for supervisors on chlorine behavior at grade. At 16:40, Pam walked the Unit 4 perimeter with Mercer from State Environmental and Ortiz from County. They stopped at the west curb where the cloud had pooled, now clean concrete with chalk marks from prior sampling. Mercer checked his meter, then nodded. Reading stable? No residual hazard in open air. Ortiz closed her notebook. Investigation packet is complete on our side. Your evidence handling made that possible. Pam looked through the fence toward the parking rows where workers were getting off shift, moving slow, breathing easy, ordinary in the best way. No horns, no haze, no argument. She ended the day in the control room she had been ordered out of, standing at the same console rail, the same startup panel, the same red banner location now blank, because the unit remained down until every corrective action cleared. The junior operator came in with a fresh SOP draft and set it beside her. I wrote the new stop work language, he said. Pam read the first line. Any operator may halt toxic transfer when mitigation safeguards are unavailable. Management cannot override without documented independent safety concurrence. She nodded once. Keep that exactly. By 1705, the final notices were posted. 40 documented medical cases with full follow-up coverage, 41-day chlorine unit shutdown confirmed, direct repair and cleanup costs booked, production loss filed, insurer denial segments recorded, regulatory fines assessed, civil claims routed, and corrective actions under external oversight. Every call had a callback. Every sample had a lab report. Every bagged record had a custody trail. Every look that had asked for silence had either spoken or been entered as silence in testimony. Pam signed the last page in the corrective action binder and capped her pen. Derek had bet one shift window against procedure. Physics had collected the debt with interest,